She wears white linen and thinks it means purity. Marguerite is 16. The musicians left an hour ago. The guests, hundreds of them, are waiting in the corridor outside her chamber door. She can hear their voices through the oak, low and expectant, like the murmur before a sermon. They sound pleased. They sound celebratory. Her mother told her this morning that tonight would hurt, but only briefly. That tomorrow she would wake as a wife, and the week after, the documents would be signed. 2 kingdoms would become one. Her father's debts would vanish. Her younger sisters would have dowries. The candles are beeswax, expensive, arranged in silver holders along the walls. 30 of them, maybe 40. The chamber smells of lavender and hot wax. The bed is larger than any she's slept in. Its curtains are pulled back, tied with gold cord. The sheets are linen, bleached white, laid smooth by hands she never saw. She stands beside it now, barefoot on cold stone, and notices something she didn't before. There are 12 chairs arranged in a half-circle near the foot of the bed. All of them are occupied. An elderly woman in black, her aunt. 2 men in physicians' robes, seated side by side, hands folded identically. A bishop she met this morning, his face stern beneath his mitre. A scribe with parchment and ink. 3 men in noble dress, strangers. Henry's cousin, his uncle. Another bishop, younger, from Rome. None of them look uncomfortable. None of them are preparing to leave. Marguerite's hands begin to shake. She clasps them together until the shaking stops. Her mother did not mention the chairs. Her mother did not mention witnesses. The door opens. The marriage treaties of the 15th century were not ceremonial fantasies. They were contracts between kingdoms, signed by men who measured risk in bloodlines and verified it through law. When Marguerite of Valois was promised to Henri of Castile, the terms were precise. Land, gold, military alliance, trade routes through the Alps, her father's debt forgiven. But more than that, certainty. Certainty that the marriage was real, certainty that consummation had occurred, certainty that any child born afterward could not be disputed, could not be annulled, could not be used as grounds for war. In a world where a throne could rest on the legitimacy of a single heir, doubt was inadmissible. So doubt was engineered out. The church had rules, canon law, books written by men who had never married, detailing what made a marriage valid in the eyes of God. The crown had older rules, customs that predated the church, built by dynasties that understood marriage as a transaction requiring proof of completion. And when the two aligned, when ecclesiastical authority and royal necessity agreed, they built systems not out of cruelty, but out of what they called necessity. Marguerite's family needed this marriage. The kingdom was bleeding gold into mercenary wars. Her father's treasury was empty. Henry's family needed proof the marriage happened. Needed evidence it could not be undone by a future pope, a rival claimant, a bride who later claimed the marriage was never consummated. And proof, in that world, required witnesses. Not symbolic ones. Not priests standing outside the door, blessing the union in absentia. Real ones. Witnesses who would sit, who would watch, who would report what they saw to bishops, notaries, and kings who would record it in ledgers kept in stone vaults beneath cathedrals. Marguerite knew none of this until tonight. Her mother had explained the wedding, the vows, the feast, but the rest, the verification, the procedure, the witnesses, had been left unspoken, because it had always been this way, and none of them had refused. Stories like this were not meant to be remembered. They survived because someone recorded them, and someone else kept reading. The law was older than anyone in the room. A marriage was not complete until consummation. This was not opinion. It was doctrine, written into canon law in the 12th century and reaffirmed by every council since. A marriage could be annulled, voided entirely, if consummation had not occurred. But consummation could not simply be claimed. It had to be verified. Verification required observation by parties of standing, clergy, physicians, noble witnesses appointed by both families. If the bride was royal, the rule was absolute. If succession was at stake, if alliances hinged on legitimacy, if war was the alternative to certainty, then privacy was not a right. It was a risk no kingdom could afford. So the system demanded transparency. What you are about to hear was once considered normal. The bedchamber was a legal theater. The witnesses were the jury. The bride and groom were the evidence. The act itself was the signing of the contract. And the contract, once signed, could not be undone. Refusal was not an option. If the bride refused, the marriage could be annulled. Her family would be shamed. The groom's family would demand the return of the dowry. If the groom refused, the same consequences followed. Both families had too much at stake to allow hesitation. The marriage was not theirs. It belonged to the kingdoms that arranged it. The witnesses did not attend out of voyeurism, they attended out of duty. Many kept their eyes on the floor. Some took notes, clinical, procedural notes about positioning, duration, evidence of completion. A few murmured prayers. But their presence was the point, because in a world where women's bodies were treaties written in flesh, where dynastic survival rested on the legitimacy of heirs, the only way to enforce the terms was to watch the signing. And Marguerite was about to learn that marriage was not a sacrament, it was a legal performance. Henri enters the chamber. He is 18. His doublet is gone. He wears only a linen shirt, unlaced at the throat. His hair is damp. Someone bathed him, prepared him the way one prepares a sacrifice. He does not look at Marguerite. He looks at the Bishop of Lyon, who sits in the chair nearest the door, hands folded over the bronze cross resting on his chest. The bishop nods. Permission granted. Procedure initiated. Henri approaches the bed. His steps are measured. He has been instructed, told what to do, what to say, what gestures would satisfy the protocol. Marguerite steps backward, her shoulders touching the carved bedpost. Her eyes move across the faces in the chairs. Her aunt, who held her as a child, now watches with the same expression she uses when inspecting livestock at market. Two physicians in black robes. A scribe with a quill, ink already prepared, parchment laid flat. None of them look away. The scribe is already writing, recording the time, the date, the names of those present, the beginning of the verification. Remove your shift, Henri says quietly. It is not a request. It is instructed. His voice is steady but empty. Marguerite's hands move to the tie at her throat. Her fingers fumble. She pulls, twists, finally loosens it. The shift falls open. She hesitates. All of it, the bishop says. His voice is not unkind. It is procedural. The consummation must be unobstructed. The verification requires clarity. Marguerite pulls the shift over her head. She is naked. The candles are too bright. She wants to cover herself but her aunt shakes her head, a warning. Do not resist. Kneel on the bed, Henri says. Marguerite climbs onto the bed. She kneels, facing the headboard, her back to the room. She can feel their eyes. Not lustful, clinical, observing. Henri extinguishes 3 candles near the bed. He leaves enough light for the witnesses to see what they must see. He removes his shirt. He kneels behind her. The scribe's quill scratches parchment. One of the physicians leans forward, watching the position of their bodies, the alignment. He nods to the other physician. The positioning is correct. Henri places his hands on her hips. His palms are cold. Marguerite closes her eyes. She hears the bishop murmur something in Latin. A prayer. A blessing. A legal formula. Henri enters her. The pain is sharp, immediate. Marguerite gasps. Her hands grip the sheets. She does not cry out. She was told not to cry out. The scribe writes. The physicians watch. Her aunt looks at the floor, one hand covering her mouth. Henri moves. Mechanical. Efficient. He was instructed to be quick, to complete the act in a way that satisfies the legal requirement without unnecessary prolongation. It lasts 4 minutes. When it ends, Henri withdraws. He stands. He pulls the sheet from beneath her and holds it up toward the candle. The witnesses lean in. There is a stain. Small, red, unmistakable. The bishop rises. He approaches the bed, inspects the sheet, examines the stain. He touches it, rubs the fabric between his fingers. Testing. Ensuring it is blood, not wine, not fraud. He nods to the scribe. Verified, he says. Consummation witnessed and confirmed. The marriage is complete. The scribe writes the word in Latin. Consummatum est. The physicians confer. The witnesses begin to leave. One by one. No one congratulates them. Marguerite remains kneeling. She does not move until her aunt comes to the bed and covers her with a cloak. It's done, her aunt whispers. You did well. Marguerite does not ask what done means. She already knows this is not over. The Bedchamber Protocol was not unique to Marguerite. Across Europe, it repeated. In France, Castile, England, the German principalities, the Italian duchies. Any marriage where succession mattered, where alliances were fragile, where annulment was a threat. The witnesses varied. Sometimes bishops. Sometimes midwives brought from the countryside, women experienced in matters of anatomy. In some courts, the bride's mother was required to attend. In others, the king himself sat in observation, ensuring his daughter's marriage, and his treaty, could not be undone. The protocol evolved. By the 14th century, some courts required consummation to occur within hours of the wedding ceremony. The bride and groom were escorted directly from the chapel to the chamber. The witnesses assembled. The act was performed. Immediate, undeniable, recorded. Other courts allowed a single night of privacy, but privacy came with conditions. The door was sealed from outside, guards were posted. In the morning, physicians entered. They examined the bride's body for signs of penetration. They inspected the bedsheets. They questioned both parties. They wrote reports, detailed, clinical reports stored in cathedral archives. In 1501, when Catherine of Aragon married Prince Arthur in England, witnesses stood outside the bedchamber door. Arthur emerged in the morning and announced, loud enough for them to hear, "I have been in Spain tonight." The witnesses recorded it. Years later, when Henry VIII wanted an annulment, those words would be used as evidence. The system scaled because it worked. Marriages were not annulled if consummation was verified. Treaties held. Disputes were preempted. The law eliminated the need for trust. And trust, the system assumed, was too dangerous to allow. Women learned not to protest. Refusal meant the marriage could be voided. Their family would be shamed. The alliance would collapse. So they complied. They knelt. They endured inspection. They gave their silence in exchange for legitimacy. The witnesses, too, learned not to question. They were performing a legal function. Discomfort was irrelevant. The bride's humiliation was collateral to the kingdom's stability. The system sustained itself not through force, but through acceptance. It was the law. It had always been the law. And the law, the Church taught, was God's will. To question the law was to question God, so no one refused. The protocol continued. The chairs remained occupied. The sheets were inspected. The bodies were documented. And somewhere in stone vaults beneath cathedrals, the records accumulated. 3 months later, Marguerite stands in a different chamber. This one is larger. The walls are frescoed plaster painted with saints and martyrs. The bed is draped in crimson silk. The floor is heated, warm beneath her bare feet. She is in Rome. She is here because the Bishop of Lyon has raised concerns. The consummation was verified. The marriage was recorded. But whispers have begun. Whispers that Henri has not returned to her bed. Whispers that 3 months have passed and she is not pregnant. Whispers that the marriage, though legal, is not being fulfilled. So the Vatican has sent a legate. Cardinal Borromeo is 64. He wears scarlet and gold. He does not smile. He sits in the largest chair, his hands resting on a leather-bound ledger filled with names, dates, the intimate details of royal marriages across Europe. He has overseen 100 verifications. This is routine. Marguerite stands before him, flanked by 2 midwives sent from the Vatican's medical college. They are older women, dressed in black, faces impassive. They have examined queens. They have examined saints. "You will disrobe," the cardinal says in Latin. The midwives step forward. Their hands are efficient. They unlace her gown, remove the layers beneath until she is naked. The cardinal looks at her body, cataloguing. Breasts, abdomen, hips. He notes something in the ledger. "Approach," he says. She is made to stand on a platform, arms at her sides, feet shoulder-width apart. The position is specified, designed to allow complete examination. The cardinal gestures to the elder midwife. "Examine her." The examination begins. The midwife's hands move across Marguerite's abdomen, checking for pregnancy. She finds none. She inspects her breasts. None. She asks Marguerite to turn, to bend, to spread her legs. Marguerite complies. She learned, 3 months ago, that resistance is futile. The second midwife kneels. She performs the internal examination. Marguerite's breath catches. The midwife's fingers are cold, clinical. She probes, measures, withdraws. She wipes her hands and turns to the cardinal. No signs of repeated activity, she reports in Latin. The hymen was broken, the initial consummation is confirmed. But there is no evidence of ongoing conjugal relations. The bride has not been touched since the wedding night. The cardinal writes in his ledger. "The marriage is valid but incomplete," he says. "The groom will be summoned. He will be examined. If he is found capable, he will be instructed to fulfill his obligations. You will be examined again in 6 weeks." Marguerite is dressed by the midwives. She is dismissed without another word. As she leaves, she sees Henri in the corridor, waiting. 2 physicians stand beside him. He does not meet her eyes. He, too, will be examined. They will inspect his body. They will test his capacity. They will determine whether the failure is his, hers, or a matter requiring ecclesiastical intervention. The system does not stop at the wedding night. It follows them. It measures them. It watches them. It ensures that the marriage, purchased with gold and blood, produces what it was designed to produce. An heir, proof, continuity, the witnesses are gone, but the examination never ends. The system has transformed from a single night of observation into a sustained apparatus of surveillance. Privacy was always an illusion. The marriage was never theirs. It belonged to the crowns that signed it, and the church that blessed it, and the law that enforced it. The Bedchamber Protocol began to fracture in the 16th century, not because anyone questioned its morality, but because it became a weapon. And Boleyn's marriage to Henry VIII was verified. Witnesses confirmed consummation. Documents were filed. But when Henry wanted the marriage annulled, when he decided and had failed to produce a male heir, he claimed the marriage had been invalid from the start, not because of lack of consummation, but because of a prior contract. The protocol could verify an act, but it could not guarantee permanence. The system's weakness was not its invasiveness. It was its inability to prevent kings from changing their minds. By the 17th century, the protocol became inconsistent. Some courts still enforced it. The Spanish court required witnesses until the 1650s. In German principalities, physicians continued inspecting royal brides until the early 1700s. But in France, Louis XIV's marriage was privately consummated. Witnesses waited outside. The king's testimony was sufficient, but the practice did not vanish. It mutated. It descended. In rural areas, where noble families mimicked royal custom, the tradition continued for another century. Minor aristocrats summoned midwives to verify their daughters' marriages. Sheets were inspected. Brides were examined the morning after, not by bishops, but by the groom's mother, the village priest, the family matriarch. The last verified case in France occurred in 1782. A minor duchess, married at 15, was subjected to post-consummation inspection by 3 witnesses, a midwife, a priest, and her husband's aunt. The inspection was recorded. The marriage was later annulled for unrelated reasons. The records were sealed. The case was forgotten. The protocol did not end because people decided it was wrong. It ended because it became unnecessary. Marriage law evolved. Annulments could be obtained through other means. Legitimacy could be contested in court through legal technicalities. Witnesses were no longer required when lawyers could argue doubt into existence without needing physical evidence. But the women who endured it left no testimony. Their voices were not part of the record. The system documented their bodies, not their consent. The ledgers recorded verification, not violation. The archives preserved procedure, not pain. What remains are the documents. The ecclesiastical logs that list names, dates, and a single word, verified. Marguerite of Valois, Catherine of Aragon, hundreds of others whose names were filed and forgotten. Their bodies were evidence. Their marriages were contracts. Their dignity was irrelevant. The system did not see them as victims because the system did not see them at all. Civilization is not the opposite of brutality. It is brutality dressed in procedure. The Bedchamber Protocol was not designed by sadists. It was designed by lawyers, bishops, and kings who believed that certainty was more important than dignity. That legitimacy required proof. That proof required observation. They built a system where verification was sacred and privacy was a threat. They did not see it as cruelty. They saw it as necessity. And necessity, when spoken in Latin, when recorded in ledgers, when enforced by the church and the crown, becomes law. And law, once institutionalized, becomes invisible. It becomes the way things have always been. The women who knelt in those chambers were not seen as victims. They were seen as participants in something larger than themselves, dynastic stability, international peace, the will of God. Their suffering was not suffering, it was duty. Their humiliation was not humiliation, it was procedure. Their bodies were not their own, they were instruments of state, treaties written in flesh. And the state required proof. The horror was not that it was hidden, the horror was that it was recorded. Every inspection, every verification, every moment of forced transparency, archived in ink, sealed with wax, filed in stone vaults where scholars would later find them and call them history. Where historians would note, with clinical detachment, this was the custom. The system did not collapse because anyone remembered the women. It collapsed because the kingdoms that built it no longer needed them to kneel. The political calculus changed. Annulments became easier. Privacy became fashionable. And slowly, quietly, without anyone declaring it cruel, the protocol faded. But it did not disappear. It transformed. It moved. It found new spaces where verification was still required, where bodies were still instruments. The chairs are still there, if you know where to look. If stories like this matter to you, stories that were recorded, buried, and left unspoken, then you may want to stay here. This channel exists to uncover the system's history tried to forget.